All right. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton. So Hillary Clinton has some splaining to do. A lot of explaining to do. You know things are bad when CNN, here's a CNN headline. Hillary Clinton personally approved plan to share Trump-Russia allegation with press in 2016, campaign manager says. That's CNN.com.
Yikes.
You know it's bad, right? So what's going on here? Well, a few characters that we want to introduce you to. First is this guy, Robby Mook. Here is Robby Mook. There he is. He is one of Hillary's campaign managers. That's Robby Mook. And then we have, who else do we have? We have Michael Sussman. Michael Sussman is right here. This is Michael Sussman, Democratic National Committee. He was the lawyer. For Hillary Clinton's campaign. So you got the campaign manager, and you got Michael Sussman. That's Clinton's lawyer, Michael Sussman. So what happened? Well, we all know that Hillary, Mook, and Sussman, we now know this, that Hillary, Mook, and Sussman got together and created a fun little story about Donald Trump. They concocted a bullshit tale that a Russian bank was communicating with Trump's server. Which, first of all, on the surface, just making that up even sounds bizarre and
well,
odd.
it's a I know you are, but what am I? Move, right?
How so?
Because she was all about using the
email.
server,
Yeah,
right?
The private email. Yeah.
Can't we think of another device?
Right. So she's like, yeah, well, let's sign off on that. Ooh, another server story that gets me out of the headlines
They
about my emails?
like talking about servers? Okay, let's turn this around.
Let's do it. So they literally made this up. They literally concocted this thing from scratch, fed it to the press, and then the liberal media ran with it for 2 years. But, of course, we now know, and we knew, I think probably well before that it was a total lie, right? It was a total lie, a total fabrication. So let's go deeper on this because the walls are starting to close in for Hillary Clinton. We know all of this, though, because testimony from Mook himself at Sussman's trial. So, again, this is Robby Mook testifying. I guess, once you actually have to go in front of judges and you're testifying, you're going to probably start telling the truth. So let me read from the Wall Street Journal and what he said during this trial. So he says, we know it came from the top. Candidate Hillary Rodham Clinton. That was the testimony Friday by 2016 Clinton campaign manager Robby Mook in federal court. And it continues. While this news is hardly a surprise, it's still bracing to find her fingerprints on the political weapon. Mr. Mook then testified as a witness in special counsel John Durham's trial of Michael Sussman, the lawyer accused of lying to the FBI. In September 2016, Mr. Sussman took claims of a secret Trump connection to Russia's Alpha Bank to the FBI and said he wasn't acting on behalf of any client. Prosecutors say he was working for the Clinton campaign. So they concoct a story that Trump is basically in bed with the Russians. They invent this, right?
Yeah.
How do they do this? Well, this guy Sussman worked with cybersecurity researcher, opposition research firm Fusion GPS.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yes, you have. To fabricate the claims on behalf of the Clinton campaign. They make basically phony digital breadcrumbs that never existed. And by the way, Trump denied it all along. He's like, we don't have a server talking to a bank. He's like, we don't have any of this. I don't even know what you're talking about. Clinton's own lawyer makes up this shit. Okay, Sussman makes it up and then drops it like it's hot at the hands of the campaign team. Takes the fake story, gives it to the campaign team. Like, holy shit, I just found this amazing piece of information. I just was walking down the street. I just found this. We just happened upon this. Here you go. You should probably look at this. So then Robby Mook, Jake Sullivan go to Hillary Clinton and they get her approval to send this to the press. And then Mook admits in testimony that Hillary said, yep, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead with it. I sign off on this. Let's leak this to the press.
Now let's put a pin in that for a second and remind you that she was a lawyer, a good lawyer, right? A successful lawyer. So a successful lawyer who would have known, we need to verify this. We need a paper trail, right? If we're going to be pushed on this, what can we say that we knew was true, right? So there's no burden of proof here. It's not the idea that she had sort of sold us is that she was a successful lawyer. She was an A student in law school, that she would know better than this kind of thing. But in this moment, she was not that, which was one of the reasons that I endeared to her at the time. I was like, this lady, at least she's been doing the homework for all these years, right? But she did not, in this case, do the homework. She signed off on it because she was playing politics. She was not being the Hermione Granger that I had given her credit for.
So here's how CNN writes it up. Robby Mook said he attended a meeting with other senior campaign officials where they learned about strange cyber activity that suggested a relationship between the Trump Organization and Alpha Bank, which is based in Moscow. The group decided to share the information with a reporter, and Mook subsequently ran the decision by Clinton herself. We discussed it with Hillary, Mook said, later adding that, quote, she agreed with the decision.
Okay,
Yeah.
but she didn't make the decision. She didn't make it. It's something. Okay, don't give me that look. It's something. She didn't make it up, right? But she went with it.
She went with it. She didn't make it up, but she agreed.
But someone on her team made it up.
We can't we don't know. We don't know. And also, we have to believe for a second that she has no idea that this is happening, right? That she's literally kept in the dark. That her lawyer, Michael Sussman, that Robby Mook, Jake Sullivan, no one made her aware of any of this. That she's just totally like plausible deniability. That's the real question here. Like, what did she know about the plot? Right? That's the ultimate question
Trump
here.
got off on a lot of stuff with plausible deniability that you could never pin his fingerprints on, right? So,
well, that's the ultimate question, right?
yes, it is.
We discussed it with Hillary. She agreed with the decision, which they did. And they released this then to Slate Magazine. They released it to Franklin Fuhr over at Slate Magazine, who published then the bogus story, which had massive implications, of course. Here it was on Slate, was a Trump server communicating with Russia. Access to nearly comprehensive logs of communications between servers. Mr. Mook said Mrs. Clinton was asked about the plan and approved it. A story on the Trump Alpha Bank allegations then appeared in Slate, a left-leaning online publication. So the article gets published by Slate by reporter Franklin Fuhr, and then the next day, Hillary Clinton sends out this tweet, right, after the Jake Sullivan summation of the Slate article. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump Organization to a Russian-based bank. Statement from Jake Sullivan. So she tweets the statement from Jake Sullivan, who, by the way, is Biden's national security advisor. So it's just amazing
right
to think.
in this minute.
Right now, Jake Sullivan is working for President Biden, right? Like, think about how is this guy still allowed to have a job? Ask yourself that. And then, so she tweets that, she sends that tweet out. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert. She's like playing it like she's just, we don't know. Apparently this happened.
Look at this bad news about my opponent.
Wow, it's so surprising that this just turned up. So here's how mainstream media, I mean, I'll just give you a taste of how the mainstream media covered this story. Now, this is 2 years after this story broke. And the Trump campaign denied it all along, saying this is total fabrication. But of course, the left-wing media was like, this is just too obvious, right? Trump is definitely connecting with Russian banks. Absolutely. Even though it was totally false. Here's how Rachel Maddow played this. And just watch now as just like how giddy she is about this whole thing. This is, by the way, this video is 2 years after the story broke. And watch how she fawns over the new coverage that just got rolled out that day in the New Yorker and how they played this up. Just watch this.
Probably all just a big coinky-dink. But for whatever reason, at the height of the campaign in 2016, a server used by that bank kept making contact with a server at the Trump Organization. When that server was being used for almost nothing else, why was it communicating with a Russian bank?
Yeah, great question.
It's a vexing little mystery. Ever since Franklin Fuhr first reported on it, for Slate.com 2 years ago, Halloween night, right before the 2016 election. It has been a very controversial piece of reporting. Well, now Dexter Filkins at The New Yorker has picked that up and run with it. And, you know, even if you have felt like this is one of those confusing stories, one of those sidebar stories about the Russia investigation that seems too technical and you're not sure you get it, pick up a copy of The New Yorker or go to newyorker.com. Just print out this Dexter Filkins article. Don't read it online. Print it out. Read it on paper. Read it in a quiet moment. One of the blessings here is that Dexter Filkins is a very, very good writer. And I promise you, even if you have been mystified by this story before, you will be intrigued by it the way that he has written it up.
Go on.
And I'm going to let him tell you the story. But just to prepare you for that conversation, here's a few things that he sort of blew the lid off here with this piece in The New Yorker.
Oh, did he?
Number
Okay,
one,
please.
turns out that at the same time Franklin Foer was pursuing this story at the very end of the presidential campaign in 2016, the New York Times had been pursuing it too.
Oh, really? That sounds interesting. Because again, Franklin Foer knew nothing of this story. It was literally invented and handed to him by the Clinton campaign. So really? Also, the New York Times was working this angle of this story. Wonder where they got that information from. I wonder if we'll find out how many other shops this was shopped around to.
Yes.
Right? If the New York Times was actively working on this story as well, well, then clearly they were shopping it around to multiple places. And somebody bit, by the way. It's interesting to think about what crappy news organization actually bit this, right? It was like, yeah, we'll run with that.
And did not report it themselves.
Right. So he was pursuing this story. I love how she frames it. Franklin Foer was pursuing this story. No, he woke up one morning and it was in his inbox, typed out for him. That's how he pursued it. Someone handed it to him. So the New York Times was not pursuing this either. They were literally, either being shopped it or this is total bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Investigative reporter for the Times named Eric Lichtblau had the story and was working on it even before Franklin Foer started working on it for Slate. As part of reporting that story, Eric Lichtblau at the Times apparently came to learn that the FBI had an open counterintelligence investigation underway into possible contacts between people associated with then presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russia.
Oh, interesting.
How'd they get that lead, do you think?
Oh, don't ask those types of questions.
Well, we know now, in fact.
Right.
In fact, new information from that trial shows that the Clinton campaign sent those probes to the FBI, and the FBI was under the assumption that the Justice Department was passing down this information in order to open an investigation, but it was not the Justice Department. It was just because the Clinton camp, was so well connected, they were able to sort of make it seem like, hey, open an investigation about this thing.
And that was the brilliant part of this, right? Which is that Michael Sussman, the lawyer, says, we are really concerned about this story. We're really concerned about these things that we just learned.
Yes.
That we fabricated. But we just learned this about about Trump. Here you go, FBI. You should really look into this.
Now, recall at this time in the campaign, right, one of Donald Trump's favorite things to say was, you can't elect someone who is actively under investigation by the FBI, right? Well, that would make him unelectable right now, but okay, right? And so she then was trying to get an investigation to be opened about, or her camp, about him, so that line would backfire, right? Because at this point, there were so many chants of lock her up. There were so many people convinced of her criminality. And so this sort of shows again, I know you are, but what am I, kind of like, let's just stick that right back on you, if that's what you're saying. I think what upsets me the most about this is because, I supported Hillary Clinton. I did feel, I told you how I felt about her. But, at the time, we thought that Trump yelling fake news was sort of a weaponization of news in order to deflect things from himself. And, then he just continued to scream it. So if he was actually, it really does upset me to think that if he was the victim of fake news, right? And we just we didn't hear him because of his otherwise unlikable behavior. And now, like, look what we have. Fake news has morphed into disinformation, and news has become weaponized even further. And I think that we are still seeing the reverberations of this, and it's only gotten worse. And these are the people now who are telling us what is disinformation, the same people who perpetuated it at the same time.
Yeah, it's really awful. I mean, the Western media was absolutely weaponized, against President Trump. And you can see it. You can, whether you like the guy or you don't. And I'm going to get into a discussion about that. But it was political malpractice. It was media malpractice. It was criminal what they did to him. I mean, at the end of the day, it was absolutely criminal. And that's why there's a trial, by the way, But
right.
If you think about like this Russia-Trump narrative that Mrs. Clinton sanctioned, it did massive damage to the country. Like, just by her allowing this to happen, it disgraced the FBI, right? It humiliated the press. I mean, the press has a worse approval rating than President Biden.
Yes.
It sent the country into a 3-year investigation, which cost millions of dollars, that went nowhere, found nothing.
Well, it went places for
It went,
people
like,
around him.
Well, that's what always happens, right? Like, I mean, just look at, look what happened to Bill Clinton, right? It affects the other people, right?
Yes.
And so that's what happened here, right? A 3-year investigation that basically went nowhere, all because of a lie that they fabricated. So it's going to be interesting to see, at what point now Robby Mook's out there saying, well, she knew about it. She sanctioned it. Is it plausible deniability? Well, I didn't know what I was.
Well, I'm not going to agree with you
to.
that the Mueller investigation was nothing. There was something there, but it was not what I don't want to get into it. But at the same time,
Yes, there were absolutely things there. Absolutely. But what always ends up happening is it ends up becoming a witch hunt. Like, look for anything. Let's start digging up other things. And then
I don't think that's the case.
you don't think that's the case?
No, I don't. I read the Andrew Sussman, is that his name? The book Where Law Ends. He was one of the lead investigators. And it's all about how Andrew Weissman is his name, Where Law Ends inside the Mueller investigation. And it's a really important piece about exactly what happened during that investigation and how they split up and how they followed certain things and how they really tried hard not to be influenced by the media and and the decisions they made, which I think were the right ones. So I don't want to say that, but it has, and it's hard to say who did what worse, right? So they both were playing dirtball. Like, they both were playing dirty, both of them. He was dragging out Clinton's mistresses, like, no one was playing nice in that election.
No, of course not. But, it's an indictment of the Western media that fell lockstep in line with this. And then Rachel Maddow had, every night for 2 years was Russia. Every night for 2 years, it was Steele dossier. Every night for 2 years, it was all about this.
Yes.
Right?
And most of the odious things about Trump, like Tombstone is pointing out here, right, which is the grab him by the you-know-what or the crippled journalist or those kind of things, or things he did to himself. The Clinton campaign didn't even have to, right?
Right.
And people still chose him despite those things.
Right. That just goes to show you what an awful candidate she was, right? Like, even all of that, like, you have audio of him saying that and even all of that, and the way that, and then she pulls this out of her hat. Even after all of that, being an awful candidate and even this, and she still lost.
But this is the campaign that got people so convinced that the voters who had voted for Trump were misinformed. They only made that choice because they were misinformed. This was sort of what I thought at the time. I comforted myself with this, thinking, oh my gosh, this guy, people must really have just not understood. That's why they voted for him. That was wrong. That was presumptuous of me to think. But now look where we are, where governments are like, oh, yes, you voted wrong. Let us now tell you exactly what information you need to have and what information you shouldn't, right? It's led us down this whole censorship. And this maybe not be the small inception of the snowball, but it certainly was a piece of it. And boy, that campaign, what a disaster.
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website, to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.